You know what you should do? You should follow me on Twitter at Brommer018. Link in the description. Do it now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another FIFA 20 custom tactics video, the series where I show you how to recreate and adapt real life tactics in FIFA 20 so that they'll actually work in game. Today we switch our focus onto a more classic system in the sense that it's not currently presently used, and that is Jurgen Klopp's Borussia Dortmund tactics. The 4-2-3-1, most conveniently and most often as well, that led them to have lots of success, a Bundesliga title, a Champions League final that were very unlucky in, German Cups as well. So it worked out very well for them. Before we do get into it, I just want to say, did a video recently on Jude Bellingham and his move to Borussia Dortmund. I'd really appreciate it if after this video you go and check that one out, add it to the watch list, the watch later list, whatever it may be. Check out my channel as well. You'll find on there my most recent upload, and I'll really appreciate that because I put a lot of time into those sort of videos, and I think it might be of interest to you if you are watching this Dortmund video. With that being said, let's get into the tactics. You should have everything on the right hand side. We have some gameplay and also some suitable players as well to suggest to you whilst we have the tactics on this screen. So first off, you're going to go with a 4-2-3-1 wide system. And it's probably important to lay down the marker here of what this system is all about. So it was quite versatile. The predominant sort of approach in games would be, you know, to counter-attack at pace, to win the ball back in terms of a gegen-press very, very quickly. But if they couldn't win it back within, you know, a certain amount of time, then they would sort of form back into their defensive shape, get back behind sort of the halfway line. And that's how they then look to hit teams on the counter-attack. And you'll see it in the gameplay on the right-hand side as well. Very much the most important thing when playing with this system in the game is that you try and replicate as best as you can. So you keep players in their shape when you're in defensive situations. When you're looking to attack, either you know, the most important thing to do is, you know, you're counter-attacking at pace. And what I mean by that is obviously you're not just doing things quickly, lots of short passes. Instead, what you're doing is you're trying to create as minimum amount of passes as possible. So rather than just trying to play through the thirds, if you see a player running into space and there's a lot of you know, sort of trying to create and exploit space in this system, then that's what you're going to do. But before we do get into sort of the instructions and each roles and talk about how we create that space, there are a couple of things you want to change. So obviously with the 4-2-3-1 wide, you'll have two central defensive midfielders, you'll have your back four, etc, etc. One thing that you want to do is you want to change both fullbacks to wing backs. So as you can see here, we've got Schultz and Hakimi. Would have been Schmelzer and Piszczek back in the day, to wing backs. And the reason being is that you know, you want them to get as forward as possible. And this is sort of a recurring theme amongst Jurgen Klopp's systems. He's got a lot of emphasis on the fullbacks and how they can create a greater attacking impetus. And this is one of the reasons why it's a 4-2-3-1. You've got those two older midfielders, because when you've got the fullbacks getting into such advanced positions as well as wingers, you've then got two sort of you know, more defensive-minded players, more pivots for possession, who can fill in those gaps, you know, in order to try and counteract the opposition counter-attack because of the space that the fullbacks have left behind. So, you know, that's very important. With them being wing-backs in this game, they'll just get a bit further forward. They'll create more width as well. So that is very, very important. So that's it for the positioning. We can now move on to the instructions. We'll start with the keeper and we'll work our way through the players. So first off with Berkey would have been, of course, Roman Weidenfeller. Everyone comes across in sweeper keeper. Now, in FIFA, pretty much, regardless of sort of tactical preferences of real life systems, you want this. You want your keeper on both of these, comes across and sweeper keeper. There's not really any upside whatsoever, I don't think, to having them being less aggressive, playing less on the front foot. With comes crosses in particular, just makes it easier on you. You know, helps you sort of defend those situations. Sweeper keeper, they did play a high line anyway. And Weidenfeller, whilst he wasn't, you know, Manuel Neuer category, who of course was sort of the catalyst for this sort of thing in the modern era. You know, he did very much seize the initiative, try and play on the front foot when you know, the game required. So as a result, you're just trying to replicate that as best as you can. So sweeper keeper and comes across will help fine. two centre-backs. You don't need to change anything here. That is perfectly fine. Got Hummels, who was, of course, back in that system as well. Did have a spell at Bayern Munich before returning. And they also have predominantly Zubatic as well here. You've got Zagadou, you've got Akanji. You know, in the gameplay on the right-hand side, you'll see that I did play Akanji over Zagadou. The reason being, it's just that he's got a little bit more pace. You've got that sort of slower option in Hummels, who's better, you know, with the defensive side of the game. But in order to sort of, you know, play into and sort of manage the fact that the opposition will try and run in behind, they'll try and play balls over the top. Just want someone a little bit faster. So, you know, I did go for a Akanji over Zagadou, a lot faster. Just a little bit more security in that sort of area. On to the fullbacks next. Both of these will be on join the attack and overlap. Very self-explanatory. One thing that you'll notice in this game, and that you would have noticed as a Jurgen Klopp system, they get into those advanced areas. They create width, but they're also an attacking presence. You know, they're one of the most important parts of the attacking phase of the game in a Jurgen Klopp system. And it's the same here in this Borussia Dortmund system as well. One of the things to bear in mind, and we'll come on to it shortly, is that the wingers, their roles is sort of altered in order to help the fullbacks, to aid the fullbacks, create more space for them on either side of the field. We will come on to that shortly though. But yep, join the attack and overlap for them. Moving on to the two holding midfielders next, we have Axel Witsel and Emre Can here. One thing I will say, and obviously you'll see in the sort of suitable players around side, I think, you know, Emre Can's very, very good in this position. If you are going to play as Dortmund, you know, say you're on career mode or what have you, you know, Emre Can, very, very good. Axel Witsel, not so much. You know, we're looking for a little bit more energy, particularly because of the fact that he'll come out onto the wing a lot because he'll be filling in for the fullbacks. You know, I just found he was a little bit sort of slow off the mark, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I think he's a very good player, and he's got all the other attributes, but you know, I just don't think he's helped by that. So, you know, do just bear that in mind as well. So both centre defensive midfielders are on the exact same instructions. Stay back while attacking, because as we've already mentioned, they'll fill in the gaps defensively for the fullbacks, but also they're a possessional pivot as well. So when you're sometimes playing against teams bottom of the league, maybe they've got, you know, 10, 11 men behind the ball, it just enables you to sort of maintain possession, keep probing for that opening, but you know, you won't always have that issue. In defensive behaviour, we have them both on man mark as well. So, you know, we spoke about this in a couple of previous tactics videos, something that I like to call a man press or a lane press. So when they did, you know, sort of try and instantly win the ball back after losing it, which is, as we all know, is the gegen-press. You know, there are multiple ways in which you can go about that. You can do like a man press, which is what we're doing here, which is where all your players are essentially trying to man mark the opposition, and the one man who's pressing the ball goes and the other players are sort of marked out the game. And so obviously you can only do that with holding midfielders. You can't do that with the rest of the team. They don't have marking instructions, unfortunately, but you can at least do that with the two holding midfielders here. So, you know, with that you can at least get it in the middle of the park and create that little bit extra security, particularly against teams like maybe a Bayern Munich who are playing two advanced midfielders in a midfield three. So yeah, that's very helpful as well. And finally, defensive positioning on cover wing as well, because as we already mentioned, they'll fill out those gaps. Next up, we are going to, let's do the wingers first rather than the central attacking midfielder. So both of these are also on the same instructions, but you have heard me mention just a moment ago how their instructions are altered in order to sort of aid the fullbacks. So obviously you have them on comeback on defence, and that's pretty self-explanatory. They'll trap back any opposition fullbacks who are looking to overlap, and they'll do their defensive duties, retain that sort of shape. So that's absolutely fine. But then in terms of chance creation, we actually have them both on cut inside. So what you'll find is, and what happened in a sort of Jurgen Klopp system, is that the wingers would sort of come inside a little bit more when they needed to, and then that would create obviously a lot of space, because the fullback is going to then, you know, come narrower, closer to his centre backs, and then therefore your fullback can then run off into that space that has been created If, however, the opposition decide that they don't want the fullback to track the man and they want him to stay in that position, then the winger picks up space in the middle and you can work from there. You can get players in around him and sort of work the ball into the box. But predominantly, obviously, teams are going to follow the winger. They're going to man mark. And so it creates that space for the fullback and just another counter-attacking option. What you'll notice in the gameplay on the right hand side is that a lot of the times the wingers would come inside, but they'd still be trying to exploit space as best as possible, and it would leave space for the likes Hakimi in particular, who is just fantastic at this. Really enjoyed playing with him in this system. You know, he's able to just exploit that space on the right hand side, so that really helped. But with support runs, we want to both on getting behind, so that gives you another emphasis on utilising their pace, trying to, you know, sort of get in behind, penetrate the defensive line, but also it gives you that extra emphasis on counter-attack as well. You know, you've got players running, surging forward, the 4 attacking men, the 2 fullbacks. That's how you get sort of a deadly counter-attacking system that Borussia Dortmund were just so good at, you know, under Klopp. Not just sort of the team that finished in the Champions League after, when they had, you know, a few changes, such as Lewandowski leaving, people like that, Blazikowski sort of, you know, on his way out sort of thing. They signed the likes of Aubameyang, they signed Adrian Ramos, you know, pacey players who again sort of did the same thing. And finally, we support on crosses, get into the box for crosses as well. So you're going to have roughly about 4 men, and we'll come on to that when we talk about the tactics pretty shortly. But again, that helps with the whole counter-attacking system. Trying to be slightly direct as well, in the sense that they'll whip a lot of balls in. That's another sort of Jurgen Klopp system. They try and exploit the wings in order to get crosses into the box. They're a very cross-heavy sort of team. And so with more targets in there, it just makes it a little bit, you know, sort of better in that sense. So that's the 2 wingers covered. Now we talk about Ryce, and I've got to say, you know, you may have noticed it if you've been watching much of the gameplay on the right hand side, but Marco Ryce was probably man of the match. Really enjoyed playing with him. I think in this role with these instructions, he's sort of a match made in heaven, and that's sort of what we're looking at in the suitable players. You're looking for players who are quite mobile. Maybe they are converted wingers, as Ryce is. He used to play on the left, of course. Maybe they are converted wingers who come inside. They've still got a lot of mobility, but they're very technically gifted, and they're able to sort of pick up lots of positions, roam around in those attacking areas. And they just simply create more mismatch options. So one, comeback on defence, and everyone is really, you know, getting into their defensive shape, other than the striker, which would have been Lewandowski. In this case, Erling Braut Haaland, who just sort of retains that outball threat. But with Ryce, you have him tracking back. But then we support on crosses, we have this unbalanced. So sometimes he will get into the box, but other times he just sort of acts as an additional pivot, particularly if the 2 fullbacks have committed and they've got forward. Maybe they've driven to the byline, in which case, you know, it just gives you a little bit more protection, because, you know, you've only got Witsel and Chan there. But finally, we got him on free roam, and that's the most important thing. What happened with the attacking midfielder, which would have generally been Mario Götze in the earlier days of Klopp's system, you know, he sort of drifts from side to side. He'll pick up spaces all across the width of the pitch, and that's very important, because that's what helps to create as much mismatch options as possible, and also create a more effective counter-attack, because you're exploiting as much space as possible. And that's sort of what this is all about. It's about creating space, it's about exploiting that space that you've then created with certain mismatch options. You're scheming different players into the game, and that's what's so effective about Jurgen Klopp's systems, not just at Borussia Dortmund, but also what you find at Liverpool as well. And so this is something that I found was really effective in game. Finally, we have the big man up top, Erling Braut Haaland. Not a whole lot to his game. As I mentioned, stay forward already. You'll have that on. And then attacking runs, getting behind. So once again, just feeding into that counter-attacking system. With Harlan, you've actually got an even better option than what it would have been under Lewandowski, because you've got someone who's very tall and very strong. So he can, you know, sort of hold the ball up when he needs to, bring people into play. But you can still have him on getting behind, because he's a pacey player as well. And therefore, he's still got that deadly nature on a counter-attack to penetrate defensive lines by running in behind using his pace. So he's just a mismatch option, a nightmare matchup for any sort of centre-back dealing with him. And finally, on support runs, we have this on balanced. The reason why we don't want it on stay central is because, once again, you're trying to exploit as much space as possible. And sometimes you'll find the striker drifting from side to side just to find those little holes on the last man and in the defensive line where he can then try and run in. So with balance, you sort of get that nice sort of roll in between. So that's it for the player instructions. If you do have any questions, of course, do be sure to get at me in the comment section. Now we'll move on to the team tactics. So one, as we've already spoke about, press after possession loss, not constant pressure. Press after possession loss is essentially a gegen-press, trying to win the ball back instantly. But after, and what it says here is 7 seconds, can be a little bit longer, you know, depending on sort of the team. It doesn't have to be a 7-second rule, just in this game really, is if you haven't won the ball back, you know, fairly instantly, then they'll form back into their defensive shape, get their sort of 2 banks of 4. You'll have Ryce a little bit ahead of the midfield 4, but still part of that defensive shape, and then you look to sort of drop back in, be patient, win the ball off position, and then you know, hit them on the counter attack. And that's what's very deadly about this system, is, once again, as I mentioned at the start of the video, versatility, a lot of different ways. You know, you might have noticed with the gameplay stats at the first half, you know, I had about 53% possession, so a little bit more, but then at the end of the half, the end of the game, which you won't have seen yet, of course, I ended up having less possession, about 47, 46. So despite the fact that my possession had gone down, you know, compared to the first half where I'd had a bit more, and we've shown that versatility, but I also had more shots anyway. So it's more about being productive with what you have with the ball, not just having sheer amounts of possession. With defensive whip, we have this on free. It's a nice and narrow system. You don't want people playing through you. You want to try and go out. You want them to try and go out wide, basically. In which case, you've crowded the box. You've got the likes of Hummels, who is very commanding in the air, and you trust him to deal with those balls. You trust your defense, just to get it out and just to deal with those situations. So with width as defensive free, and that's generally why a lot of teams just go narrower. You know, so it's not as easy for teams just to play through them. With depth, we have this on 8. Of course, they play the high defensive line. We don't have this all the way to 10, just to drop it off a little bit so that you have a little bit of leeway, particularly when you're playing against other people online and using this system. People are obviously, you know, quick to just try and feed the ball over the top to a pacey front man. This just gives you a little bit of leeway while still having that high defensive line to be able to instigate, you know, a sort of a gegen counter press. Moving on to offense now. Offensive style, we have fast build-up. Again, we're looking to try and counter-attack as much as possible. We don't want to be holding onto the ball for too long. There's a lot of vertical emphasis, quick passing, you know, make one pass rather than making 2 or 3 sort of thing. But you're not just hitting and hoping. You're trying to create players, get them into space so that it's a clear, obvious pass. And that's the most important thing. So you've got to keep working on that. It can be hard to sort of have a counter-attacking, you know, an efficient counter-attacking style, truly effective, but it can be done. So it's just something that you really want to work at. Offensive style, though, this time you want free, and that's because you're trying to complement as much as possible the wingers coming inside, creating the width for the wing backs. And obviously the wing backs are going to be the widest part of the team because we've changed them from left and right back to left wing back and right wing back. So that's very important to know as well, and that's why we do a lot of these things, just to try and, you know, make it as realistically, you know, accurate and reflective of the tactic as we possibly can. So with width on free, you sort of, you know, you create that as effectively as possible. With players in the box, we have this up to 8, so you've got it on 4. You know, we can generally be Ryce being that 4th man as well as the 2 wings and the striker, or you can maybe have a fullback coming in occasionally. So, you know, it just sort of switches between, you know, those sort of 2, but generally have this up to 8 here. And finally, with corners and free kicks, what we always do in these videos is move these up to 4 each. That way you'll have 2 men back, which is more than enough to deal with an opposition counter-attack. You'll have 1 on the edge, but then you'll have extra targets in the box rather than 3. You know, where you're just less deadly, and it's hard to score corners on this game anyway, and wide free kicks. So if you just give yourself a little bit more leeway with that, a little bit more help, you can be a slightly more deadly from those situations. So that just about rounds it off for this video then, guys. If you do have any questions, as I've already said, please don't hesitate to get at me in the comment section, leave your questions in, and you know, I'll do my best to get back to you. Some do slip through the cracks that I just don't see because, you know, sort of the whole YouTube commenting, it's still a little bit broken, so I do apologise if not, but you know, I do my best to get back to every single comment. Don't forget to check out the video I spoke about at the start of the video, why Jude Bellingham chose to move to Dortmund, and sort of talked about his move to Dortmund and what they're getting in him as a player. I really would appreciate that. And be sure to check out all my other tactics and real football opinion videos as well. Lots of playlist links probably at the end of this video. Lots of suggestions coming in about other tactics to do. Don't worry, I'll get on them at some point, you know. I think it will maybe be Pochettino's Tottenham next, but we'll see. Don't hold me to that one because it could change. But we shall certainly see about that. Please do leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, but most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more regular football and gaming content. On that note, we are going to finish it off there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.